Hi, it's Stephanie Ricca, Bryan, Wroten, and Trevor Simpson with CoStar News Hotels reporting live from the International Hospitality Investment Forum at NYU, commonly called the NYU Conference, held every year in the beginning of June. This is where we take the pulse of industry health at the midpoint of the year. So guys, this is where we typically say cautiously optimistic, optimistically cautious. What's the vibe? Bryan?
Having gone to Alice at the beginning of the year, folks there were a little worried, I think, just with all of the disruption we saw last year. Still had reason to believe things could go pretty well, having had most of January done and on the books by that point. But I think after making it through the first quarter and seeing results come in a lot better than they were expecting, and seeing, so far pretty decent performance during the second quarter, a lot more people. I mean, they're still cautious, but they're definitely a lot more optimistic than they were, I would say, even at the beginning of the year.
Right, and things are happening too. Mm-hmm. Sure. So we saw in the first quarter transaction pace and volume was up. Hotel performance metrics also very strong. Demand came in higher than expected, along with RevPAR and ADR. So Trevor, you were in this morning's, we'll say Monday's opening general session, where you kind of got that big picture of the numbers, the economy. How did that start the tone of the event?
It definitely set the tone of optimism. Obviously, like you said,
the strong numbers.
There is a bit of that caution still in there, but it was more so optimism because things are going well, especially compared to what we were expecting coming into the year. So CoStar revised their forecast up quite a bit for RevPAR. It was at 0.6% growth in 2026 in February. That was their most recent forecast. Now it is up to 2.8% growth year over year. If you look at it across each asset class, RevPAR growth is projected to be positive in each of them, which is a good sign, especially for economy and mid-scale, seeing some positive growth.
And those have been the laggards.
I listened to Adam Sachs talk about some of the numbers, said that consumer sentiment is at its lowest in its recorded history.
Wait, at its lowest?
At its lowest, but consumer spending is still relatively high. That's where the caution comes in, is are we approaching a breaking point at some point very soon? I don't know. We will see.
That came up a bit in the CEO panel.
Yeah.
In the afternoon. Bryan, what did you hear about that consumer sentiment versus spending piece?
Well, I mean, one of the things we heard is something we've been hearing for a while now, especially, once we saw revenge travel from the pandemic. People want to travel. People are going to maybe cut back on other types of,
where
consumption.
They're spending
They can cut back elsewhere and dedicate more of that money to taking the trip they've always wanted to take. They want to spend more on travel than on material goods. So there is still this belief that people, at all levels of the socioeconomic range, they're still going to travel. Obviously, the wealthier travelers, they're going to travel more. They're going to spend more when they travel. But people are still, maybe they're going to drive to someplace instead of fly because airfare is so much more expensive now because of the cost of jet fuel. So there's still under the impression that people are going to prioritize travel with their discretionary spending.
The vibe I got, now to be a little contrary,
Please.
So the major CEOs from major global hotel brands talked this afternoon, and they are very bullish on that higher spend traveler. And in general, just that idea, like you just mentioned, about everybody's going to travel. It's fine. I think they're stretching it a little bit. I think it was Mark Hoplamazian, CEO of Hyatt, brought up the worry, when they were talking in that panel about what are some of the things that are challenges that worry you. And he talked about the war in Iran. Middle East hotel performance has absolutely taken a dip since that happened. And most of these brands, most of the Western-based brands, do not have high exposure in the Middle East. So it's a small part of their portfolio. But what Mark Hoplamazian brought up was this idea that, yes, conflict, war, eventually will be resolved. Oil and fuel prices will come back to a normal level, but that takes a long time. Okay. And right now, and potentially for the next year, that is hitting the consumer right in the pocketbook. And so, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I think that there's going to be a ceiling to some of that never-ending travel.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. I
Right.
mean, when you see constantly, in the news, on social media, people talking about price of groceries, price of gas, just general cost of living issues. I mean, we saw news come out last week about, incredibly low rates of personal savings,
Right.
Compared to, previous years. I saw something about more people dipping into their 401ks, which is something, you hear never do.
Right.
Because of how, it benefits you so much later on. The more you have in there, the more, longer you hold it in. But if people are worried about, paying for groceries, making rent or mortgage payment for the next month, are you thinking 20 years ahead, or are you thinking next month, next week?
And I think that's where the uncertainty still lingers, right? Yeah. Uncertainty has been the buzzword for the last year and change, and that's where that still lingers. These executives are on a stage going to say that things are good, and, performance data is showing positive numbers. I talked this morning to Kevin Davis, who's the CEO of the Americas for JLL's Hotel and Hospitality Group, and I asked him if the bid-ask gap was gone. And he said, no, it's not gone, but that bridge the bridge is closer. The gap is tighter. There's, some more access to different types of funding, to capital. And so transactions are happening. Hotels are being bought and sold, which is always a good sign. That's another positive. Trevor, anything else stand out to you from the day?
Yeah, I wanted to touch on a little bit as the Gen Z representative up here.
Yes.
There were a few references to how Gen Z is going to play a role in shaping the next era of the hotel industry. And it plays back into the broader concerns that we have right now about disposable spending. And it seems like there's kind of just an assumption that the Gen Z traveler really, really, really prioritizes traveling, having experiences, which is true to a certain extent. But if you don't have the money to do it, how are you going to do it? And that's the question. And obviously you see young influencers and people who have money doing this kind of traveling, but I think there needs to be more done in order for the generation as a whole to finally start making a real dent and impact for the hotel industry down the line.
Which comes down to being able to save money
Exactly.
in order to spend it.
Yeah.
So that underscores Bryan's point. Bryan, any other big takeaway from the day?
Everyone's still real excited about AI, and by AI,
Yes.
I mean specifically artificial intelligence.
Which in the hotel industry, you have to clarify from
all-inclusive.
All-inclusive.
Allen Iverson.
And Allen Iverson.
And just really believe how transformational is going to be focused more on the administrative side of things, and the promise that it is not going to remove humanity from hospitality, and I certainly hope that'll be the case.
That's a good note to end on. That's a good wrap for the day. Guys, remember you can find all of our coverage of the global hospitality industry at CoStar.com/hotel news, as well as coverage from this event. Thanks.
Hi, I'm STR's Isaac Colazo.
And I'm CoStar's Jan Freitag. And together we are the data geeks behind Tell Me More, a hospitality data podcast work.
Every month, we bring you a fresh take on the latest hotel data, insights into the travel trends behind that performance, and the big picture topics you should be thinking about.
And we also don't mind getting into some good-natured disagreement from time to time. Hey, when Isaac and I start talking data together, anything can happen, and it usually does.
Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen.
This episode of the CoStar News Hotels podcast was recorded on June 1st, 2026 from the NYU IHIV conference in New York City. The podcast was edited by Trevor Simpson. Visit CoStar.com/hotel news for the latest industry coverage and look for all of our podcasts on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or your platform of choice.